You are listening to He Said, She Said, with L.A. Rob, and D the VIP. Oh yeah. Well, we are back. Hello, Internet. This is He Said, She Said with L.A. Rob and
D the VIP.
The VIP, the one and only. Here we are, back again with our latest episode, and today we're talking about
what everybody is talking about, in America at least. I think worldwide, actually. Ebola.
The Ebola virus.
Outbreak. Yeah.
You know, it's amazing. Like, I remember there was HIV. I remember back in middle school, they were talking about the swine flu. Mm-hmm. And now the Ebola virus.
You just dated yourself with this stuff.
Oh, God. Yeah,
okay.
I know. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, okay.
Don't remind me.
Yeah.
So, here we are now. I remember hearing stories about the Ebola virus and people saying that it could, if there was going to be an apocalypse, this could be potentially the cause of an apocalypse. But, for good reason. I mean, I think what's different about America now is that we have planes, trains, and automobiles, and we're, a global society. People go to and from a country all the time.
Well, that's fortunate, and it's unfortunate, because you can isolate problems like diseases and things like that, because when you didn't have transportation, people couldn't travel and take the disease with them. Now they can, and that's evident by what happened last week when we had the passenger come in from Liberia, and he came to Dallas, and basically he had Ebola, so he brought it to America.
Yes, and in the process, I believe he infected quite a few people. Even I believe the ambulance, the paramedics that I believe treated this person, they had to be quarantined. The ambulance itself had to be quarantined. And this is just one case, So,
well,
health workers, they're like
on the front lines of it.
They don't know what to do.
But here's the problem that I have. First of all, after he came over, the guy, I believe his last name is Thomas, but after he came over, we found out that the only screening that the airlines had at that time was a questionnaire for passengers saying, were you around somebody who was sick? Are you yourself sick? Have you had certain symptoms? And of course, if you're a person, you're in a country that is pretty much a third world country. It doesn't have the best medical care. It doesn't have the best of anything. And you have the ability to go to a country that does, even if you have the virus, it gives you a fighting chance of beating it. You're going to lie on that questionnaire, which is what he did. So now we have this person who flew on an airplane full of people carrying this virus, in the airport full of people carrying this virus, in a apartment complex full of people with the virus, and had any number of meetings, outings, and contact with any number of people, all while he had contact with Ebola, and eventually the symptoms became more pronounced, and he had to go to the hospital for it. But how many people were infected or came in contact with it during the time? So for me, that was a wake-up call, and I think it should have been one for the president, that we need to do more to secure the borders and make sure that we don't have a mass outbreak over here.
Yes, this has been an ongoing debate, and I would say that primarily like until it actually happens, it's not really important, you know. But I remember even in the early days after September 11th, people were seeing strands of anthrax laced letters to various senators and, you know, various. I believe it was somebody in the mail carrier who's handling the mail. They, I believe they died because of that. And you saw like the total cost of, you know, scrubbing down the entire building and making sure it's 100% free of anthrax. I mean, there's a huge cost, a huge dollar cost to taking care of this, because the thing is the public demands that that everything be safe. You know, we don't think twice and we take it for granted. But when the rubber hits the road, and if God forbid this becomes a really big thing, I seriously doubt the government will be able to take care of that. I mean, right now we're engaged in war, you know, with ISIS right now. So, you know, I believe, you know, the president, the president has a lot on the table, and, you know, to quell potential panic, I believe he has a very difficult road ahead of him.
Well, definitely, but I think we're at the point where certain movies are becoming a reality. When you talk about like World War Z, and I mean, let's get beyond the outbreak. Let's quarantine. Let's get beyond the zombie aspects with some of them. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a huge reality in that if we do have an outbreak. I mean, I was looking online the other day, a couple of weeks ago, and I found where they had fallout shelters for the rich, and these are underground apartments that were built years ago because they were supposed to be like bomb shelters or something, and they had been abandoned. It's in Kansas, and they sold these units for $1 million to $2 million, and this place is sold out. And up underground, you have an apartment, you have food, rationed food for 5 years. There's a Jeep that is, I think, depends on solar energy or something like that. You have water and a water filtration system up underground that will support the complex. So you have everything that you need should you have, you know, an outbreak, like a major outbreak, like Ebola. The funny thing was they called it the Walking Dead kind of apartment or something funny like that. But unfortunately, that's not going to be funny because, you know, with this outbreak, that may be a reality. Not that you'll see people who are dead, the undead, walking around, but you may see a lot of infected people walking around, and it becomes those who are infected versus those who are not, and, you know, a call for quarantine and all this other stuff. So it may get kind of crazy.
Yeah, I remember, like, I know one thing that I know about in other countries, like with Asia, or, you know, people coming over to this country during the swine flu, scare, they would come over and they would wear a mask. You know, our Asian friends, they're already ahead of the curve, and, you know, I would see they're the first to start wearing masks and stuff like that, you know. And I think we're at a point where America is going to start adopting the same policies, where you get dressed and part of what you put on is going to be a mask. Yeah,
I think we definitely need to secure the borders. We need to. It has to be. I know that they announced. They being the U.S. government announced that there was going to be another procedure, some kind of test that you'll take to identify if you may have Ebola. I don't know what that test is. However, why weren't they using it before if such a test does exist, number one. And number two, from what I've read, it won't show up for 21 days in terms of the virus. So here's my proposal. My proposal is, if you plan on traveling in this to America from West Africa, then you need to be willing to be quarantined for 25 days before you're released to travel. If you aren't willing to do that, I'm sorry, because it's just too, the risk is too much. Like, how are they gonna? They said one guy off the plane, they can't even track him down. Well, one of the passengers. So how are you going to track down everybody who's been in contact with this guy?
It's impossible, because this is the thing. I used to work in the airline industry, and these planes are turned around so fast that it's really, it's not just the people on the plane who are at risk. It's the people who have to clean the aircraft. They have to clean the bathrooms. They have to wipe down the seats. The trash, dishes, everything you could possibly think of. There are people who work at the airport who have to do the laboratory services. So, it's not just, at the end of the day, these people, who don't get paid a lot of money, they go home, to their families, and that is a potential, point of contamination. Because the thing is this: the airlines, they work kind of like McDonald's. I hate to say it, but it's a complicated operation that works kind of like McDonald's. I mean, everything is done. Everything is set to be really fast. So the idea of creating a realistic policy to stop an Ebola outbreak is not realistic. I mean, we've all heard stories about people who've been stranded on the tarmac. Planes delayed, and you're stuck in a fuselage, a tube with, all kind of people sneezing, and you're breathing filtered air, for 16 hours straight. I'm just saying, it's this whole, these scares are inevitable. It's just a sign of the times. Because now the thing is there used to be a time where there were parts of the world that were unknown, and villages were cut off and stuff like that. But more and more, because of globalization, we're starting to encroach on different types of bacteria and forms of life that were previously untouched by human beings. And now, with the Ebola virus, the second we catch it, because we don't know much about it, the second we have an understanding of it, it'll mutate, and we're kind of like behind,
Yeah.
So, I hope it doesn't, because this is the thing, is what I really fear is that we'll reach a point where there are people who are infected and there are people who are not infected, and the people who are not infected will do whatever they have to do to defend themselves against people who are infected.
That's pretty much where I think we're going with things.
It will come down to you and me, and they're gonna,
Well, it's almost like there was this movie, I can't remember the name of it. I want to say that Cuba Gooding Jr. was in it, but it was basically people who were infected with the virus, and they put a stamp on them, like they had a tattoo that basically said in like plus or minus, or like they were infected. And so if you were infected, you were quarantined, and you lived in a certain area, you couldn't go beyond that because you were infected. And those who were not,
well, they had the leper colony. Remember Hawaii? They had the colony for lepers. They would put them on an island, and they would just be miserable on this island.
Yeah.
with their leprosy. It's coming to that point where we're going to start putting people with Ebola on their own island and just be done with them.
Yeah. Well, I think they're trying to be a little more humane about how they treat this, but I will say, I was against bringing the doctor and the nurse who were infected to America. Because I felt like they should have been treated in West Africa. I feel like whatever it took to cure them, they need to take over to West Africa to cure other people. Because, they're saying, oh, well, it's only going to be contracted by contact with blood or bodily fluids or feces or any of those things, like they sneeze, cough, that kind of thing. However, you see people spraying the air because honestly they don't know how it's traveling. So I felt like then we should have let them stay over there because we don't know what the fallout will be from the 2 people that they brought back. The CDC brought back and they treated them in Atlanta at Emory Hospital. So I was against that. I'm against sending 3,000 troops to West Africa. The president has said for tutorial purposes, and they're not going to be in an affected area. They'll be in a quarantined area and blah, 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 blah. The only thing I can think of is that you're sending these 3,000 soldiers over there who may come back with a deadly virus and bring it to who? So their families are at risk. My thing is, we can't help everybody if we can't help ourselves. If we can't ensure that we protect the borders and we protect ourselves, we can't help anybody else. Like, they have a serious crisis that's already close to 4,000 people have died from it, and and they're steadily dying. And if we have a cure, we need to give it to them so we can stop that.
Well, with all due respect, I do believe that we have more to gain from worrying as much as we can about it. I think if we just stay on this side of the continent and say, good luck, and not get involved in any kind of way, I mean, it's inevitable that somebody here will catch it, and I think the more we wait to understand as much as we can about this virus and try to catch it, I think just staying over here and just kind of being like, okay, well, good luck over there. And
well, my thing is,
we have to be proactive.
Well, I would like us to be proactive, but I want it to be us being proactive with volunteers. If you, like the doctor who volunteered and he happened to get Ebola, or the nurse who volunteered, she got Ebola. If you volunteer to go there, you want to do research and you want to do all that, good luck. I'm against mandating that somebody has to go over there. So I'm against sending 4,000 soldiers or 3,000 soldiers over there and telling them that, well, you're there to teach the healthcare workers over there and to train them and to do blah, 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 whatever it is. I'm against that part.
Yeah, I really believe that something should, something should be done. I remember hearing, I had an interview from from a Nigerian, and they're saying, so how bad is it over there? And I know the media has a tendency to blow things up and make things worse than it really is. So to me, it's really hard to believe how bad something really is, because the media is about fear mongering. And I remember distinctly during the swine flu, they were saying that this was going to be a really big thing, and it didn't really become it didn't really become a thing. So the thing is like, I'm personally, it's unfortunate that people have died and people have become infected, but to say that this is an epidemic and that we should start, buying water and, basically living in fear, I don't think is very helpful.
Yeah, I don't think we're at that point, but I think we should take certain precautions to make sure that we don't get to that point.
But I mean, we live in, there's no secret that we live in Hollywood. And Hollywood has we have a rapid transit system. We have
As all major cities.
Yeah, well, in this particular major city, we have this underground subway system, above ground subway system. Hundreds of thousands of people commute back and forth every day. I don't know how these trains are, kept, but.
Well, see, that's my problem, because the other reason why I say we need to be a little more cautious and scrutinizing the border is because with ISIS and all these other people who are sworn enemies of the state, what's to say they don't become a biological threat, in terms of if you're willing to throw, to hold a grenade in front of a tank to blow everybody up, what's to say you won't say, oh, let me just go over in Liberia, get infected, come back to the United States and just chill out, until I die. So let me just infect as many people as I can. I'm not saying hopefully, prayerfully, I hope nobody does that, but I'm saying we need to really tighten down these borders to, just in case.
Well, I really believe this has been this is a problem that goes direct. I mean, they've been trying to stop the trade of drugs. They can't stop drugs coming into the United States from other countries. They can't.
Well, I think we're not going to debate.
We have illegal immigration that I really believe they can't stop. They can't shut down the
I think that a lot of stuff that can be stopped. I think a lot of people in high places get paid off for drugs. I was looking at this list of the top 20 drug dealers. I'm not going to attribute it because I'm not for sure if it's who I think it is, but I thought it was Forbes, a list. But a very prominent family in the United States history and society, their patriarch was named on that list. And this is a family that is highly revered. And it said, it had listed that their patriarch was a drug dealer. From the history that I know, is he wasn't a drug dealer as much as he was involved in bootleg liquor. Same thing, illegal. You're not supposed to sell it. So, but he made a huge amount of money, and that money secured the future for generations of his children. So, I think that if the United States wanted to stop drug dealing, they could. But that's another story. We're talking about Ebola.
That's a whole nother can of worms.
That's a whole nother can of worms. We're talking about Ebola.
So anyways, back to Ebola. So I would think that, I washed my hands already, but I really think that as far as emergency responses, I don't think we're prepared to handle a major epidemic. Let's just play devil's advocate and let's just say, okay, Ebola blows up and becomes the worst epidemic in the history. Because before, I remember in history class, I learned the bubonic plague killed millions of people. And that was because people were, I believe they were throwing their waste into the water, and then they're drinking water, and they were drinking the water, and they were therefore infected. So they realized, well, let's stop doing that, and that virtually, made the bubonic plague extinct. And there's no more of that. With this is true. With this, we know that in hindsight, we know exactly where that came from. Now, we know very little about this virus. And, the potential for that, the whole learning curve of us trying to figure out.
I say we should learn. I just say since Liberia and Guinea and Sierra Leone, since they are dealing with an outbreak, I say we learn on their turf. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It may be wrong. I got a Facebook message from this guy who's from Africa, and he said that I had a black heart because I said that the borders, that we needed to be more vigilant when it came to protecting our borders. And I said to him, say what you want, basically, but I'm just in I'd rather be safe than sorry mode.
Well, unfortunately, I really believe, and this is just the nature of things, is like, there's always a learning curve. With HIV, many people die, but now there are diseases that will fight the virus and prolong life. With this, it'll be the same thing. I mean, we will eventually adapt and we'll learn what to do and what not to do. We'll tighten our borders. We'll make it more difficult for the virus. Maybe we won't necessarily kill the virus, but we'll slow its progression. I really believe that will happen. However, if God forbid, let's just say it just spreads faster than we can learn about it. Mm-hmm. That could, in worst case scenario, cause anarchy in the streets. I mean, it'll be people who are infected who will, be trying to kill and murder people who are infected and burn their bodies.
Well, it's World War Z.
Yeah, it's
minus the undead coming back.
This is some serious. This is like some sci-fi stuff that could potentially happen, and I wouldn't want it to happen, but if you are in a position where you're faced with your loved one getting Ebola, what do you do? And I really fear that what they did with the Japanese will happen to the people who are infected with Ebola. They'll put them in some type of camp away from everybody else. The government will probably step in and force people to take tests, screen them for Ebola, and they will separate them and they will put them in some kind of camp.
I'm all for it. And I say that as a person, if I were infected with Ebola, I would prefer to be in a camp and in quarantine until I was cured or the inevitable happened, rather than walking around and infecting somebody else. That's just me. I would much rather know that I'm not infecting anybody else than take a chance that I am.
Yeah.
So
that's a very deep, to go to that, to go back to, World War II era.
Well, that's a little different, because in World War II, they basically just said, you're Japanese, so because of that, I'm putting you in this concentration camp because we're fighting the Japanese, which was stupid. This is a little different. This is, you have a deadly disease
that we don't know about, so we're gonna stick you all here
until we figure out
more about it.
Yeah, exactly. They did it with tuberculosis. So it's been done several times throughout history. And I understand it. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying it's like Chris Rock. I'm not saying it's right, but I do understand.
Yeah.
So as a person, if I had Ebola and I had to be quarantined, I would go for it. I would just be quarantined.
I hate to say it, but I really think behind the scenes, that's what's being planned. I'm not a conspiracy guy, but I'm just saying they looking into everything.
They should. I mean, they should. This is, like I said, I'm shaking in my boots. I don't know if anybody else is, but I'm shaking in my boots.
Wow. Because
the first people to get shit, 9 times out of 10, are the poor and indigent. Yeah. And since I haven't made my $1 billion yet, I fall into the poor category.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So this is LA Rob, and this is D the VIP. I think we've talked. I think we've said as much as we can about the subject.
Yeah, pretty much. I've said all I can say. I'm sure some of you will disagree with me, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Tell me what you think.
Yeah, tell us what you think. And if you're listening on TuneIn, give us a rating. That'll allow our podcast to be easily found in your search results. We appreciate your patronage. This is LA Robin, the VIP, signing off.
Deuces.
Peace.
So look, to follow us, you can go to iTunes, tune in. You can like us on Facebook at He Said, She Said, LA Rob, and Be the VIP. There's a lot of He Said, She Said out there. So make sure it says LA Rob and Be the VIP. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at LA Rob and Be the VIP. And if you want to follow LA Rob's shit, honey, his stuff, you can go to Mel Hondo, MALEHONDO at YouTube. Did I say everything?
You did?
Okay.
Well, no, wait, you missed one.
What?
Lord Tyree, LORDTYRE. That one is one of my older.
And I'm not calling him Lord anything. So that's probably why I messed up.
At least not on my.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Or off my either.